This study looked at the buffering role of slow-wave sleep at preventing disease. Carotid intima media thickness describes the thickness of the inner two layers of the carotid artery. This is an accessible and reliable predictor of future cardiovascular disease. The thicker the layer, the higher the risk. Exaggerated cardiovascular reactivity to acute psychological stress is associated with greater intima media thickness. In other words, stress causes measurable changes in cardiovascular activity that correlate with greater intima media thickness, so it's reasonable to conclude that stress increases the risk of cardiovascular disease. How does sleep interact with daytime disease processes to modify disease risk? We understand sleep to be a biobehavioral state characterized by observable cardiovascular changes. For instance, blood pressure declines during sleep, reaching its 24-hour minimum during slow-wave sleep. This aligns with the theory that sleep has restorative functions. It makes sense to speculate that individuals who have more slow-wave sleep will be able to better recover from stress-induced daytime cardiovascular activity. The researchers in this study hypothesized that there's a stronger relationship between cardiovascular reactivity and intima media thickness in individuals with less slow-wave sleep than in those with more slow-wave sleep, because those with more slow-wave sleep are more successfully preventing disease risk than those who don't get enough quality slow-wave sleep. For the procedure, a comprehensive cardiovascular assessment was performed in the morning after night 1 of a 2-night laboratory sleep study. To collect a baseline, investigators asked participants to count the number of times a colored square appeared on a computer screen. For the acute psychological stress task, participants were presented with 3 numbers, 2 of which were the same, 1 that was different, and had to identify the different number by pressing it on the keyboard. This was presented under 2 different conditions. In the congruent condition, the different number was aligned spatially with the button on the keyboard, but in the incongruent condition, the different number was misaligned spatially with the button on the keyboard. This incongruency was intended to introduce psychological stress. Blood pressure and heart rate were measured in both the baseline and the stress tasks, and stress reactivity, which was ultimately plotted in the following figures, was defined to be the difference between the measurements from the baseline and the stress tasks. Participants' sleep patterns were monitored the night following this stress task, and they were classified as either having low amounts of slow-wave sleep or high amounts. Each of these figures places cardiovascular reactivity, either diastolic blood pressure, systolic blood pressure, or heart rate, on the x-axis, and places intima media thickness on the y-axis. In the low slow-wave sleep group, indicated with a solid black line, we see that greater reactivity is associated with higher intima media thickness values, which we can tell by the positive slope on this graph. Looking at figure C, the correlation between heart rate and intima media thickness is strongly positive. In contrast, in the high slow-wave sleep group, indicated with the dotted line, we see that greater reactivity is associated with lower intima media thickness values, which is indicated with the negative slope. Looking at figure C, the correlation between heart rate and intima media thickness is strongly negative. Figures A and B demonstrate similar but weaker trends between blood pressure and intima media thickness. In the low slow-wave sleep groups, indicated with the solid black lines, the correlation between blood pressure and intima media thickness is weakly positive. In the high slow-wave sleep groups, indicated with the dotted lines, the correlation between blood pressure and intima media thickness is weakly negative. Overall, it's clear that there's a direct relationship between greater cardiovascular reactivity and the higher intima media thickness values in low slow-wave sleep individuals, whereas there's an inverse relationship in high slow-wave sleep individuals. This makes sense because if we agree that slow-wave sleep helps you to recover from stress, and you aren't recovering fully due to insufficient slow-wave sleep, you would expect that intima media thickness would be greater. Likewise, if you are recovering sufficiently due to high amounts of slow-wave sleep, then your body can respond to the stress and prevent it from damaging you. These results help the investigators reach a conclusion that the quantity of slow-wave sleep does indeed moderate the relationship between psychological stress-induced cardiovascular reactivity and intima media thickness. Clearly, Slow-wave sleep buffers stress-related cardiovascular disease risk, so it's desirable to get more slow-wave sleep.